Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, A-L-I-V-E, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Welcome to this episode of Man Alive on surrendered leadership. What is surrendered leadership? What is this new paradigm of leadership? I'm recording this after John Thompson and I actually had a conversation about this, because during our conversation, as we were attempting to get clear about what would be the most useful or inspirational or effective context for us to talk about surrendered leadership within, I pressed record without John actually knowing that we were recording. So as we started, I thought at some point we were going to, very specifically say, okay, we'll use this part of our recording for a separate outtake, and, we'll be very clear about when we start. But there was so much lived experience of surrendered leadership happening that I kept going with it. And at some point I revealed to John, I don't know if you realized, but I started the recording a while ago. So I wanted you to know that as you start listening to this episode. And I also feel moved to say that I think you could benefit from listening to this episode a couple times if you are someone who's really interested in leadership and new and effective ways to lead. This might be a really powerful episode to listen to, once starting from the beginning, and another time starting from much later in the episode, where John actually gets clear on his own context and what feels meaningful, or what helps him actually start to feel more alive and inspired and engaged. So, however you choose to listen to this episode, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it's powerful for you. I hope it gives you some new tools to be a more effective leader, I would say. And to really start to see that there are so many different facets of leadership. And often in my experience, in an old paradigm of leadership, there's a lot of information to be disseminated, or, there is inspiration to be given. But in this new paradigm where we talk about surrendered leadership, there's a lot more inclusion. There's a lot more, a mentor and a mentee both leading each other. There's a lot more of someone coming into the room to lead a group of people and allowing the we, the field that happens amongst everyone, to also lead. So enjoy and let us know what you think. Also, as we're getting started, for those of you who don't know John Thompson, he's the co-founder of Circling Europe. And John has been at the heart of helping spread circling to 20 countries in just 4 years. He's also helped to define and evolve the paradigm-shifting practice of circling, and more recently, surrendered leadership. Alongside Sean, John has trained over 200 circling leaders around the world and recently published a book chapter on circling called Cohering the Integral We Space. Prior to working in circling, John had a successful career in elite tennis coaching and specializing in psychology and pioneering new ways to help sport be a vehicle for profound personal growth for athletes as well as parents of athletes. He also founded an internationally famous project for street children in India and is an award-winning scholar, having published numerous journal articles in the field of integral theory and personal development, and is a certified integral coach.
I think I've said enough then. It's like I'm up for doing it, and there's a part of me that's a bit uncomfortable of, I'm not sure this is going to be good.
Right. So here, part of what I'm hearing is that in surrendered leadership, there is a not knowing of whether it's going to be good. And then that's also showing up here as we set the context for this podcast. And that for you to be in integrity in surrendered leadership, there is this surrender and being willing to not know where something's going to go, but there's also a very clear context that you set.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm imagining it would be helpful for us to have a clear context. And I'm wondering if we take a step back from surrendered leadership and have the context be about how men can be more effective leaders, if that's the result or that's what we want for men. Does that create a clearer context to do this inside of?
I get pretty scared at that context as well. Or in a way, it's like cool, but then I'd be like, how are we defining leadership would be my first question, which would then get into surrender. It would get into.
Right. So it seems like we may find ourselves with a bunch of questions as we're moving forward, where we may have to, in a way, the questions may take us back, or meta, as we sometimes say, to looking into, what are we talking about? How are we defining what we're talking about? And how can this be most useful for the people we're leading? In this case, it's the listeners, but when there's facilitation, it's the people who are in front of us. And then I wonder, does that happen for you as you're leading or facilitating people? Or is it specific to this context because it's different in that way, right? Because there's not a group of people in front of us.
Yeah, this doesn't happen if I lead an event, but this is familiar to me in like lots of other situations of like making sure that I'm in integrity before going into something.
And how do you know if you're in integrity before going into something?
I think shared reality, and that shared reality between us in this case, and being in tune with myself, like listening. So there's this fear that's strong. And it's, if I ignored that, then I'm not in integrity.
Right. In this moment, when you feel into that fear that feels strong, is there more there? Is it saying to you, okay, we need more integrity, or does it have some idea of what that integrity is? Is there something else?
It's just us finding the best context to start the interview with, I think. And us both being clear on that.
Great.
And you knowing how I feel about that context.
Okay, so let's use our jumping off point in this moment to discover our context as this brainstorm of, okay, we're talking about how to be a more effective leader. And let's see now what comes up, whether that is the context or there's something different that then we discover with that starting point.
It could be that that's our starting point. And then alongside that, you say, and that myself and the team in Circling Europe have come up with this thing called surrendered leadership. Maybe just naming that at the beginning. Or it's up to you, really. Like, yeah, the more surrendered leadership gets mentioned, the better.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want it to ever get mentioned unless it's useful in the context of what you're trying to do.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you having an eye on, whether this is useful. And it's also interesting to me because when you said it's up to you, I had this moment of thinking, okay, but this is a collaboration. And if for you're getting this message, this kind of internal or feeling sense of fear, or what you're understanding as you need to be in integrity, then it doesn't totally work for me to have it just be about me. And then what that says to me is, oh, right. I mean, this is how, as Alexis and I were co-creating the Authentic Women experience and facilitating that together, or as I facilitated circling with other people, as I imagine this may be true for you, but you can say that there is this when we're willing to not just lead from out front, and by that I mean, all right, we're creating the content, here's what people need to learn, it's very informational. When we're actually in a more of a lived experience of leadership, of how can someone actually, depends on the context of what we're leading, right? But in this case, I'm thinking, how can someone be a more powerful leader or a more effective leader? Then as a leader, I need to be on the same page in a deeper way with my co-leader than just knowing the information, right? Like we have to have this shared deeper context of why we're doing what we're doing, I think, to support the people who we're working with.
Yeah.
Which, to be totally honest, in some moments felt like a fucking hassle to me. In some moments I loved it. As I was working with Alexis, I thought, well, this is so powerful because it calls us into a deeper being, or it grows us, it evolves us. And sometimes I thought, God, if I was selling vacuum cleaners, I wouldn't have to do this shit. I wouldn't have to be so, I wouldn't have to take so much time to get clear in my own emotions and body and thoughts and context and all of that. I could just go do a thing.
How's that now?
Yeah, I'm finding it amusing, and it feels lighter to me now, but I know that at times in the past it felt like a lot of work. And you and Sean, you are John, you and Sean work very closely together. So I'm curious if that happens for you guys too.
It feels like that commitment is at the heart of everything we do.
The commitment to your relationship and being clear with each other.
Yeah, I guess what you were describing is, it's not against getting things done, but it's not willing to brush over anything that's alive in us. I mean, there's always exceptions. It's like, oh, we need to get this work done.
Uh-huh.
We don't have to speak about last night's bad date or whatever. It's not like that. But there's a sense of, if there's something in our being that's speaking up, we're actually going to surrender to that, as well as the agenda that we've set for the day. Right. So we're always willing for that pre-set agenda to actually be thrown out, because maybe there's something more important. Mm-hmm. So it's not an either or, but there is a surrender into connection, into what's arising in the present moment. And for us, it's like a bit of an experiment to see what happens with the business when we follow those principles.
Right. And are you saying that there's a priority around what's arising in the moment? Like, how do you know that that's actually more important?
Yeah, it feels like we do prioritize the moment because the moment is inclusive of that prior context. So we can't throw the prior context out.
Uh-huh.
But we trust that if we've honored that prior context and then we include what's here, that's where the surrender is. It's like, how could that prior context possibly know better than the sensing instrument that holds that prior context and has the information of what's actually here when we start it?
Wow. Right. And in a way, it feels like we're getting more and more into describing surrendered leadership. And it also feels like, I mean, for me, I think this happens whether or not I'm leading with someone else, because I can do this inside myself. But it also feels like we're talking in a way now as well about partnered leadership, or how to lead effectively with someone else. But I also want to just go back to what you just said too, around, okay, so there's a prior context that's set. And then you described, right, the sensing being, right, that we as human beings have an ability to sense, but tell me if I'm understanding you correctly, to sense, in our bodies, in our field, in a way beyond just thoughts, though thoughts could be included in that. Whether we are on track in a certain way or whether we're moving a context forward versus, I think this can be really hard to put into words, because I'm having this example in my mind, versus, okay, we're standing in front of a room. We have this idea of what we're there for. In this case, we're saying, how to teach people to be more effective leaders. And we've got this, in a way, information we're disseminating. We're also working on especially in leadership, right? We're working with people's being as well as their doing and their ability to communicate, inspire, enroll. And so oftentimes in the moment, an example could come up about how somebody asks a question, or how somebody makes a statement, or how somebody responds to someone else. And I think this is helping me put it in more concrete terms, right? Those moments can be, I would say, priceless, that they're these transformational moments, or moments that put a mirror up to someone's face or being that says, do you see the impact that you're creating in this moment? Versus we just have this syllabus and this information of here's how to have the impact you want to have in the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It points to something around surrendered leadership that it's so hard to describe, and it's like we're trying to flush it out, and it does resonate a bit. It's like within the context that we're trying to do, there's often something richer that we can find actually show up between us that actually does that prior context even more powerfully than if we were just following it. Something like that.
Right. There's something that can happen in the moment between us or between the participants that really illustrates the information that we're trying to convey. Right. For example, we could say, one of the tenets of surrendered leadership is a willingness to be in touch with what's happening in the room. Right, to be aware of individual people and their reactions and responses, and then to also be aware of what you and I might call the field of the we, right? Like what's happening in the we space versus what's happening in just the individual space. And that, I believe, effective leadership, or more, that leadership becomes more effective when someone has the ability to pay attention to all of those things as well as the context, as well as the information.
Absolutely. It's like if you're going to lead someone somewhere
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know where they actually are,
Uh-huh.
it's like, how can you lead them? Like, leading is taking someone from one place to another, and if you don't know where they are, you can't actually begin to lead them.
Right. Or I just had this vision, and this is so funny because I started recording a while ago. I think maybe you can see the recording button, but as we were starting, we weren't sure where we were going to start. So we were recording a bit about maybe how we would start and the context, and then I think we just got into it. So I think this is awesome. I just had this image when you said that of, right, sometimes you don't know where someone, if you don't know where someone is, you can't help them get where they want to be. For some reason, I just had this image go through my mind of, oh, I know where somebody is, but they're standing there with these shackles on their ankles. And I know that here's the path. Logically, right? Here's the path. You look ahead of you, take 5 steps, turn right, turn left, and then you're there or something, right? Mm. But then I look down and realize, oh my gosh, this person has shackles on their ankles. They actually can't move in the way I thought they could move, right? Or in the context of leadership, oh, this person can regurgitate information and stand in front of a room, but the way they're conducting their voice, their body, their energy, I don't actually think people are going to listen to them.
Right.
Or be able to take in the information that they really want to convey.
Yeah. I'm just thinking like how much leadership weight information transfer how much worth it has. It doesn't feel like it's worthless to me. Like the sharing of information, mm-hmm. that's a part of leadership. Mm-hmm. It just seems quite a small piece to me. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And could you, yeah.
Yes, like if that's all you're doing, then you're missing a lot of opportunities, I think.
Uh-huh. And so let's say, for example, I don't know what percentage it is, but let's say, for example, that's 20% of leadership is the information you're conveying. What would you say is the rest of it?
It's a good question.
I'm happy to take a crack at it too. I just thought, oh, that's it does seem like a valuable question.
The first thing that comes up for me is inspiration. Like that feels like a key value of leadership to me. Mm-hmm. That's where the leader is generating something and is like passing something on more than information. Uh-huh. They might be passing on information, but it's like they're inspiring people. They're helping light fires. They're helping other people become more powerful leaders, essentially. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Actually, I'm realizing I have these moments or days where I'm in the car and I just start voice recording principles of something. And I was remembering the other day and then I forget about them. And the other day I was doing leadership and I was like, oh, what would the principles of leadership be? And inspiration was definitely one of them. And before that was the ability to envision, right? First I have to envision something and see a possibility or see something where there's nothing, or how to alter something that seems like it could be more effective, or right. So I like that. There's the envisioning and there's the inspiring, and then it also
they could come together as well. I think it's like that's part of inspiring is that you've envisioned something. You have some kind of vision that's inspiring.
Right. And I'm thinking about circling. For people listening who know about circling, I'll try to keep this in a context for people who don't know about circling, that you can still understand. But I was just thinking about how, when you envision something and only you know it, it's more it's just inside of you. That's the I. And then as you inspire, that feels like the we, right? It starts to come out of you, from you, to then impact someone else so they can see this vision also. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's quite a simple model of leadership for me, but it goes a long way. Like leadership as inspiration that creates movement and energy in others, either directly towards that vision or what seems to be inspiring, or maybe that it inspires them into another vision or off in another direction. It's something about there's something about inspiration of like it's in spirit. I think that's where the etymology of the word. So it's like the map that I would use for this is like if you're helping someone come closer to their spirit or their soul, like whatever the expression of that in the world is, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
If you're inspiring people, you're essentially taking them closer to their authentic leadership in the world. As leadership as inspiration.
Well, I love that. And I love that for me and what you just said, it brings the personal into leadership also, right? Like each person's unique path or purpose or spirit or soul, however, I'm sure so many people speak about it in different ways. And it's, you listening, you could receive it in different way, right? If we said purpose, that makes sense to you. But if we said your soul, that might not make sense to you. But whatever way you hear it or whatever way makes sense to you, that leadership, and I would say this becomes interesting in surrendered leadership because I think there is something personal, and then it's a willingness to take what personally matters to you, what's important to you, what you believe in, and then bring it beyond the personal, right? To be, this is, I wonder how this is for you too, like a willingness to be transformed by your own purpose.
Right. Yeah. And maybe to be a vessel would be another.
Right. And even in front of a room of people who you're facilitating.
Right.
That if you're not resisting, wow, this is changing and growing and evolving me, even as I'm supposedly leading, and I'm making air quotes, right? I'm supposedly leading you. I think the old idea of leadership is I have the answers. I'm the one with the information. I'm the one with the power in a way. And I'm taking you somewhere. Versus the way I think of surrendered leadership is more, okay, here we are together. And yes, I have some information. I have this experience. I have this ability to sense you and sense me and the field, which we could have a whole nother conversation about. I think that is not to be underrated. I mean, those are skills that can take people, decades to learn, if not a lifetime. Right. But that willingness to be impacted, and I'll bring up the word vulnerability, right? We haven't even said vulnerability yet, but to be willing to reveal, oh, wow, I'm seeing something new here, or I'm seeing how I stop being humble in this certain context or think I know it all. Right. And then there's a breakdown in my leadership because the people who I'm leading start to trust me less.
Right.
They feel less connected to me, which then has them less able to learn from me.
Right. Yeah, I'm still actually with something you said about the old paradigm of leadership, you could say, or like where the leader thinks they know something and they're going to bring that.
Yeah.
It suddenly made me think where, like, it's a bit scary to say it, but I think that's how I still view myself as a leader from one perspective. But the expression of that is surrendered leadership. So I think the thing that I believe in and trust and know of that I'm wanting to bring is this idea of interconnectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of traditional leadership that I see happening doesn't seem to actually be coming from a place of that knowledge of how much we are interconnected and how much we influence each other and how much we're actually a we system together already.
Yes.
So that's the place where I'm like, in one sense, I'm stepping up and like in a traditional leadership manner and saying I've got something to lead.
Mm-hmm.
But the expression of that is to actually be co-created by the we in the moment of leadership.
Yes.
Which looks very different to traditional leadership and is really vulnerable and can have us do all different kinds of things, unconventional things that leaders do,
Mm-hmm.
but that it tends to lead to this experience of the we for everybody. Right. And it tends to lead to this co-creative space where all these things are suddenly happening, which is way more productive than a more top-down only model of leadership.
Right. And I'm imagining in a way to try to make it more concrete too, sitting in a boardroom or a conference room at a company where, leading and facilitating people, and rather than, there can be a set context of, okay, here's what our goal is today. But then the difference that happens even from then having their interaction of all the people instead of just that one person leading, of how do we best get there, or what another thing that might show up is what's keeping us in our relationships here from getting there, right? Because part of what I've found in leading, and I'm curious what you found, is we can be more effective. And this is part from, when we started Authentic SF, there were 8 of us who had one bank account, and we would have these meetings, and, we were attempting to grow a company. And so we learned a lot about leadership and working together. And part of what we learned, right, I think this is what you've said in different ways too, is that if there's something happening in one of the relationships, especially, one of the key relationships, these 2 people are working on this project together, these 2 people are leading this thing. If there's something happening between those people where trust isn't being built, one of them feels the other one is being condescending, any of those dynamics, those human dynamics that most leaders and managers say are the biggest problem, in trying to accomplish their goals. When we're sitting in a conference room and there's a willingness to look at those dynamics, things become more effective, more productive.
Right.
But there's also an art to that, to being able to do that without that taking over.
Absolutely. There's a way that you can lose the vision and lose the original focus and kind of collapse into interpersonal dynamics, right, and emotions and dramas, and you can lose yourself in that. But I think what's more common in traditional leadership is kind of the opposite of that. Yes. Where,
yes,
a bit of an investment in a relationship could save like 6 months of hard work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You get a team working well together, and then it's going to function well for 2 years.
Right.
It's like sharpening the saw so you can cut the wood better rather than just keep on grinding away.
Right. Exactly. That's a really great way to say it.
And I think that's quite common for that to happen. And the thing with surrendered leadership is it's actually challenges and invites every opportunity there is for that to be shown up when it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's this injunction to have attention on everybody in the room, essentially, is one of the things. that doesn't mean that it couldn't be just me speaking for an hour on one
Right.
thing. Like
Right.
it could be that those people in that room are like really ready for that information and up for it. Or it could be that something else comes up in those people that if we address that, we can create a much more powerful space that does what I went out to accomplish, but it does it way more effectively and develops our relationships as we go.
Right. Right. And I just had a thought of how I think I lost it.
I'm thinking about, because I didn't know you had started as recording.
Uh-huh. You didn't? I was wondering that whole time. I was wondering, does he know where we're going?
Yeah, I suddenly saw it and I was like, oh, okay. But there's something actually about, and I think this was probably on the recording, about like the effort that it takes to get the interpersonal dynamics smooth.
Yes.
That then links to the quality of what can be produced.
Yes.
And my experience now with us is that we're like, I don't feel inspired. I still feel like I'm working stuff out with you.
Interesting. In this moment, you don't feel inspired.
No, like I don't feel I've been inspirational in this interview.
Huh.
Like
it's funny. In the back of my mind, I've had this question of, who will listen to this and how will it impact them and what will they take from it? And it's not a kind of conversation we're having where there's a clear, here are the tenets of surrendered leadership and ABC. But I do feel like there is a lot of gold in here that's going to be inspirational. So one question I have for you is, do you think it's this kind of personal self-doubt or might be some of both? Is there something that if we started covering or you started talking about, you would have this sense of, yes, now I've been, or it's been, or we've been inspiring?
I definitely think that's possible. And something has felt good as we've gone on. And I enjoy this exploration for sure. But that I'm still left with, because that context wasn't totally clear for me, that I haven't been able to, I don't know, surrender fully or something, or I'm still in the working out of the context with you, essentially. And that I know that once that gets worked out, I trust something more magical to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, are you open to playing with this?
Sure.
All right. So let's see if we can nail a context. I mean, I think my context that I've been holding is how we can be more effective leaders, or how people can be more effective leaders. As we went on, I realized, there's also this idea in that of shifting from an old paradigm of leadership of kind of top down to a leadership that includes the we, that includes the people who are supposedly from the old paradigm being led. But I'm curious, even if in the next minute or two, we could clarify a context that feels inspiring or useful for you, and then take a little bit more time and see, does something different show up?
It's weird because there's a way that, because we've already started and it's recorded, it's like there's a way that I'm in something already that I hadn't fully consented to or agreed to.
And we can decide whether or how much of this we actually share.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
But that is interesting, because one of the thoughts I just had was, right, besides consent, I think that's its own issue, which we can talk about. But my sense is when we go in to lead people, there are, especially if it's a team of people who are already working together, there's already a context they're in. And then we come in and oftentimes create a new context or shift that context, and how that can be really challenging for people.
And how it is for me in
Right.
this instance.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you do have a very, what do I call it? Well-working sensor, right? Or I think one of your gifts is that you that you have a feeling or a sense of, right, are we aligned? Are we in integrity? Are we moving forward in a context that could be effective? But I also think, going back and realizing, okay, we've recorded a lot here, that I think we're exploring surrendered leadership. I think we're living it right now.
Agreed.
So I think that for some people, I think this is going to be really interesting if we choose to share it. For other people, I think at some point they would be like, what is happening there? But I have a personal belief that if someone's really interested in leadership, then a lot of the things we've been discussing are going to be useful. Whether or not we've said them in the clearest, most effective, most succinct way, I would say probably not. But I think it will be interesting for people to hear even the back and forth and the dynamic and the what becomes alive in the moment.
I agree, and I honor where we are and how you've done this, and I want to get this sense of magic and inspiration that I know I can read. Yeah.
So, okay, let's say we've got another 10 or 15 minutes. So let's nail a context. And it may be that maybe this podcast ends up being, we started here.
Yeah, I think we've got the context now. I think.
Yeah?
Yeah, for me it's clear.
Can you say it?
Yeah, that we're exploring leadership
mm-hmm.
and surrendered leadership,
mm-hmm.
thing that I work with and
mm-hmm.
co-created. You started recording at a set time, but I don't know exactly when that. I know roughly. I trust why you did that, and we can carry on that exploration now. And yeah, feels good.
Okay, so now we're in a shared reality of, we're not necessarily, maybe there's some pieces that have come up around how to be more effective as a leader, but maybe a more clear context or more of what's been happening is an exploration of surrendered leadership.
Right, and just you saying that shared reality bit, just that seems like such a key.
Yeah.
Because there's something that's happened now where, like, I can feel my feet on the ground. The uncomfortable kind of fear that I've had the whole time is pretty much dissolved.
Interesting.
My body's starting to relax. I feel free. Like, this is a place of creation now rather than pressure or something like that.
Interesting. This feels to me like a choose your own adventure. One of those books, do you remember from childhood? It's like, okay, go back and then you can start over and go on this path. And I wish somehow we could publish this as start at minute 13 and then go back to minute 18. And if you minute 20, then go back to minute 7. And but interesting that I'm imagining being in a meeting room, a boardroom, where, for 20 or 30 minutes, things are happening and things are moving forward, but there's also some sense of, are we really on the right track, or are we really on the most effective or impactful track? And that sometimes someone stopping and saying, okay, can we make sure that we actually have shared reality, that we're all working toward the same goal here? That feels slightly different, or a different piece of surrendered leadership, but definitely to me a piece of effective leadership.
Right. But it gives a few more pieces of the puzzle for me now as well, because there's something about, if we have a shared reality, like the degree of comfort that I've just shared with you, like that feels just like, until that point, it's like, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor for it, but it's like scarcity, and it's like just trying to fix this one thing. Really.
Ooh.
It's not a place of abundance and creativity. So I think that's a pretty standard thing, that when people don't have a sense of shared reality, there's a fear there, there's a discomfort that's really limiting that person's potential. And not only the kind of energetic quality of like potential that comes online when we have a shared reality, also when we don't have a shared reality, it's like, how can we really be working together particularly well, or like influencing each other particularly well? Because it's that same thing of, you can't lead someone if you don't know exactly where they are, or roughly where they are. It's like you have to start at the beginning, which is where people are.
Right, but everybody has their own beginning, or everybody has their own place that they're coming from. Or I was just thinking again, two people working on a project together, and if you don't go back to have shared reality around what skills do you have.
But this is where it's the now. Like, that's the other big thing of surrendered leadership, is we let go of so much of the other stuff. It's not that we throw it away, it's included, but our trust is that actually the past and even the future can be included in the now. So there's that willingness to go into immediacy, in ourselves and with each other, and into the uncertainty that we believe is actually closer to the truth. It's like, it's closer to our interconnectivity, where we're co-creating each other. And that's, for me, we can lead better when we can get things done better from that place. But it's that knowing, for me, is the most interesting thing for me to lead in the world. It's like when
knowing, say that again, the knowing is the most interesting thing?
The knowing of the knowing of our interconnectivity, the knowing of our oneness, our shared energy. Like, it's like, that's where everything magical happens for me. That's where love exists. That's where inspiration exists.
Well, yeah. And I was just thinking, okay, so, the part I started going into about skills, if two people are working together, sure, there are skills and information that they need to know about each other, right? In the concrete realm. But what you're bringing in then also is that, that there's this whole nother level, right? And even if you and I are working on some kind of technological or coding project together, right, there's this whole other level of, how could we be connected such that we could be in a space of creativity and abundance, versus we're trying to work on this one tiny little problem that eventually, and I think a lot of people have had this in the corporate world or in the work world, we work on this one little problem, we fix it, we solve it, and eventually it turns out to be, that didn't even matter. Nothing came of that. It didn't have any impact. It got thrown out. Versus, we now have this way of being connected that has inspired us to step into a greater sense of creativity and potential. And then, we can take things a lot farther from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's something in you said that reminds me of, we have a lot of leaders come into our workshops, and there's a way that, some people do circling and surrendered leadership, and it opens their minds so much to what's possible in terms of connection, in terms of magic, in terms of self-realization and purpose and mission and what really matters to them, that they can go back into their job and actually it feel meaningless. And then they go through quite a struggle, and then they actually get worse in their job for a little bit, because they're no longer performing, because they don't believe in what they're being asked to perform in.
Right.
And that's really, that's realistic. But then on the other hand, people, we've had CEOs come in who see some of their blind spots and the ways that they're kind of dominating people, and without realizing, and they get that in the moment feedback so powerfully from circling and surrendered leadership. That when they go back into their company, they end up transforming the whole thing.
Right.
and then making it a learning community based, and they see that by investing in the development of all 450 employees, it's going to make the company way better, way more efficient, but also he's now passionate about that. He can bring the circling skills in, he can bring us in to consult.
Yes.
There's all kinds of things possible. Yeah. And I don't want to dishonor the more standard leadership.
Right. No, I don't either, because there's of course something to that.
There's a place for that, but any opportunity for people to get closer to what really matters in their core, then for me, that's going to take them into a higher leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess I'm sitting with this and feeling a little bit, maybe more of that. It's funny. I'm having a little more tension now than before we clarified our context. But actually now I'm feeling the sense of that I'm supposed to get something right versus before. I don't know, which is interesting, but to me it also highlights that different people have different ways of working, and that as a leader, when you can attune or notice, oh, you over there, when I set this context, you seem to thrive. And you over there, when I set this context, you seem to thrive.
Right.
And then it's almost like a symphony of, what contexts can we set? How can we inspire each person in a different way? Then the symphony starts to play together as opposed to.
Exactly. And that, just as you say that, I feel myself surrendering my context to some degree. Because it felt like we'd somehow got into my context a bit more, and then you'd had this tension. So I'm like letting go a bit of the way where I was going. But at the same time, the context I'm inspired by is the orchestra is the best metaphor for surrendered leadership, where every instrument's different, and we invite every instrument to play, but we really need each other to tune up to get into that symphony. And your instrument's different to mine, and it's like, yes, I don't have the answer for your instrument, but we can tune each other together.
Right. And I love the moments too, right? How much things shifted in the moment where you said, oh, I have a need for clarity in this moment, or I have a need for a clear context so that I can, and you also have a knowing of what allows you to be more effective or to experience more magic, right? So in that moment, you had a need and we brought it in, and then I felt you become more alive and then I could feel myself start to feel a little more heavy, but then my speaking that brought up the metaphor of the symphony, which also spoke to how you see it. So again, that feels to me like an example of, the immediacy of the moment. If we're willing to be vulnerable and reveal, something doesn't feel on to me, but I'm not assuming, if I'm in a room full of people, I'm not assuming that there's something wrong. I'm not assuming that this isn't going the way it should. I'm not then starting to blame or attack or dominate. It's more the spirit of exploration, or kind of an experiment in a way of, is there something that could be more alive here?
Right. And the principles of surrendered leadership are there to facilitate that process. So they're there for kind of everyone to essentially help themselves to play their instrument more fully, and to allow them to receive the feedback from the other instruments as purely as possible.
Right.
And then knowing that we need each other fully to have the best symphony.
Right. Do you have actually specific principles of surrendered leadership?
Yeah. There's five principles that we work with. I can speak to them if you want.
I'd love to hear.
And one of them is trusting your experience. and that's something that I've kind of learned from these kind of interviews of when we surrender that little bit more and stay in connection, we create more than we could have beforehand. There's something that's greater than us that can come into being that kind of ticks all the boxes that we wanted to achieve, and we get much more than that.
Uh-huh.
So one of the principles is to trust your experience, which is essentially to trust your instrument. Like if you hadn't trusted your experience, you wouldn't have brought in that tension.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't think we could have got to this level of shared reality where we are now, or this level of playing together.
Yes.
And then another principle is commitment to connection. Mm-hmm. And it's all very well to be trusting your instrument and playing, but if you're not actually committed to honoring the other instruments that are around you and to listening to them, you can get a bit lost if you're just doing your own thing,
right? Playing on your own.
Yeah. So it's just to know that the connection can always bring you something more.
Yeah.
And that you're going to honor that other perspective, that other instrument.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that you have to be next to that instrument the whole time, and you have to stay in a codependency or something.
Or play the same exact notes or the same exact, right?
Yeah, it's not that. You keep your individuality, but there's an honoring and a commitment to that instrument having value and importance.
Yes.
The other, another principle is owning your experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to link it to the instruments metaphor. I've never done that before, but it's trying to play your own note as clearly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way that you can speak to the group, which you could say is making an assessment of how things are. You can say, we're just not energized today. You're just not working. People aren't working well today, and that's
an assumption then, right, about how other people are versus actually owning, this is what's happening for me.
Yeah, and as soon as you've spoken for someone and you've drowned out an instrument.
Yes.
Like if you're spot on, then that's fine to say something like that. If you're spot on and you speak to everyone, fine. You're just speaking a truth.
Yeah.
But more often than not, people miss each other so often, and then essentially you've just drowned out an instrument that you need for your choir.
Exactly. Right.
It happens so often.
Yeah.
So the practice of owning your experience, where you could basically share the same thing, which is I'm feeling really unmotivated.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of stuck, and it seems like other people are like that to me. Is that true for you?
Right. And I love that. Is that true? Right. Oh, it seems like other people are like that, but I actually don't want to assume that. Right. For you and you and you. And right, I'm noticing other people's faces, or I'm noticing this tone or something, but let me check out. Is that actually true?
Exactly. And in that way, you're engaging the other instruments, but you've engaged yourself as well. So it's like you're getting closer. There's an encouragement of yourself and the other, rather than just drowning them out.
Yeah.
Next principle is stay at the level of sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like every note of your instrument matters.
Mm.
It's like, don't ever give up some range of your instrument. Never make part of it wrong. Even though you might not know why you have this childhood fear, and it might seem really irrational, or it's like stay with yourself on the deepest level you can. Stay present to yourself.
And if we take it out of the instrument level, is it also the level of sensation for you is different than saying I'm afraid is different than actually saying, well, I have this vibration or this tension in my chest. If I actually stay with it, then I see what's fully there, as opposed to some idea I have about it.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's to try to find the purest expression of your instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be that the purest expression is, I've got this really uncomfortable ache in my chest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You might have no idea why that is, but that's all you have.
Right.
And if that's it, then you stay with that discomfort and that not knowing, and you just play that instrument and you stay with that level of sensation.
Yes. And I'm thinking of how useful that's been for my clients, both in the relationship realm and in the business realm, or, because so much of business is relationships, right? But even in the romantic relationship realm too, I've had many experiences or had clients have experiences where it's like, I don't know why, I don't even know how to put words to what I'm feeling. I just feel this, my gut feels tense. Or I've had
Yeah.
times where I'm like, oh, my heart just feels so heavy. And then if I actually give myself space, if I don't make that wrong, and I don't think I should be some other way, or don't make myself, have these ideas that I'm dramatic or I'm causing a problem or
Right.
all blah, 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 then I can actually see, oh, there's something here, something
Yeah.
I'm wanting, something I'm seeing as possible that's not happening.
Right.
Hmm.
And it matters.
And it matters, right?
And it's like that note on your instrument matter. You might not play it very often, that high note, and it might be a real effort to play that high note.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're going to create the most magical symphony we can, we need that note available.
Yeah. And what's number 5?
The 5th one is be with the other in their world.
Mm.
And that's directly from circling. Like, that's just what attracted me to circling in the first place. Just how much magic is created when we're able to just be with someone exquisitely as they are,
Mm-hmm.
without needing them to be any different,
Mm.
and just to inquire more closely as to what it is to be them.
Yeah.
And there's something about like an instrument that's listened to with, I'm imagining a child playing an instrument and has the parent that listens to them as if,
Perfect, right?
yeah,
Whatever comes out.
like it can't go wrong. And there's going to be discernment. It's like, oh, but when you played that note and that note, I actually got a bit cramped. Did you notice that as well?
Right.
Yeah, I did notice that. It's just that way of being. It's not that there can't be real in the moment feedback, because you're bringing your being. It's not just getting their world. For us, it's being with the other in their world.
Mm. Being with the other in their world. So not just getting their world, but being there. And it also sounds like with acceptance or appreciation or even celebration of, and beyond the paradigm of something's right or something's wrong.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, we've been on a ride for however long we've been doing this. And I think there's more, of course. But I'm feeling my energy start to go down, whether it's just physical or, time or whatever. But I think that's worth following as well. And I love the idea of continuing I don't know whether it's a series of these conversations or whether we do another one at some point in the future, but I love having these conversations with you. And I love the willingness to go into discomfort or to, discern what are we actually doing here, and to bring the aliveness in the moment, as well as to then for each of us to look back at the moment and say, oh, did you see that this is what was happening? Right? To me, this is this new paradigm of leadership that we've each brought into groups and workplaces and families and relationships. It's really served people, that's had people feel heard and understood, and thus inspired to contribute and be in that space of creativity and, feel more empowered, more passionate, which I think ultimately in my original context contributes to people's effectiveness.
Right.
And also to a deeper purpose in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to leave our listeners with?
I still feel a lot of energy on the topic. It just feels like it can go on and on. Like there's so it's not an easy thing to describe, surrendered leadership. There's so many elements to it.
Yeah, and nuances.
There's nuances, and it's been really cool to flush some of those out and explore those.
Yeah.
And
It also reminds me of trying to describe a spiritual experience, or a lot of spiritual teachers who say, I can point to it, but
Right.
until you experience it, it's hard. The words are hard to convey the experience.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that's what's at the heart of it for me, is a mystery, essentially, and a reverence to something. And we practice it to ourselves and to each other. And that seems to show up to something beyond us as well.
Yep.
So it's kind of, I like it's brought up, and I really want to be clear about it, because I don't want to make it overtly, it's just a spiritual thing, or like a very human thing. But at the center is something that, for me, that's very spiritual, that's very mysterious and unknown. And that's the surrender. A big piece of the surrender part is a willingness to surrender to something greater.
Right, to surrender. And in my definition of it also, right, to be moved by, to be,
yeah, exactly,
right, to be moved by, to be, it almost feels like this push from behind in a way, but whoa, I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm feeling it. Can I trust it? As you said before, can I trust my experience and allow it to take me somewhere, versus holding on or gripping to, this is what I know, and this shakes up my life and my paradigm. And as you said, this can, for a lot of people, create a lot of change.
Yeah, it can really shake things up.
Yeah.
Sure.
And what I see, and what I've seen over the past, 15 years or so of circling, is, yes, it can shake things up, and there can be these, of course, experiences of confusion, or what really matters to me now. But the common theme I've seen is it takes people into a deeper place of, what am I here for? What do I really want to experience in life? How can I really be intimate and close with other people? How can I feel understood and met?
Yeah.
Thank you. There will be more. And how would you like people to find you?
Circlingeurope.com is the best way. And
Great.
I'd love to hear from people if they're touched by the interview. And
great. Perfect. Thank you. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.